music.
And believe that you're somebody. As I said to a group last night, nobody else can do this for us. No document can do this for us. No Lincolnian Emancipation Proclamation can do this for us. No Smithsonian or Johnsonian Civil Rights Bill can do this for us.
Yeah.
If the Negro is to be free, he must move down into the inner resources of his own soul and sign with a pen and ink of self-assertive manhood his own emancipation.
Come on, Dr. King. That's the Dr. King. That's who reminds me. That was you.
Don't let anybody take your manhood. Be proud of our heritage. As somebody said earlier tonight, we don't have anything to be ashamed of.
Nothing at all.
Somebody told a lie one day. They couched it in language.
That's my leader, my
They made everything black, ugly, and evil. Look in your dictionary and see the synonyms of the word black. There's always something degrading and low and sinister. Look at the word white. It's always something pure.
Get the language right, Dr. King. That's my
But I want to get the language right.
Get it right. Lou Myers had it right, sir.
I want to get the language so right that everybody here will cry out, yes, I'm black, I'm proud of it, I'm black and beautiful.
Black and I'm beautiful, I'm black and I'm beautiful. My leader, my teacher, Dr. King. Yes, that's the man that taught me. That's the man that I was with. We're back, y'all, at our 7 o'clock hour. And we're just here this morning, and we are celebrating and commemorating the life of Attorney Lou Myers. But we're talking about many things. So we have Attorney Burby Powell and we have Attorney Jim Montgomery on the live line that we're going to bring in 1 second, in a few minutes. We're going to bring him right in. But we're talking about Lou Myers. You know, I talked to you this morning about wading in the water. I mean, some folks won't go in the water with you. They get at the edge and they go back. Lou Myers went into the edge. And I gave you an overview at the 6 o'clock hour, so I don't want to get back into it. But Lou was that person who gave so much to so many in our community. And, you know, and sometimes you have to give your flowers while someone lives. When I have Attorney Jim Montgomery on the phone, you lock him in. We'll have Attorney Jim Montgomery on. And one of the things about Attorney Jim Montgomery, you know, I look up to Jim. I love Jim because folks don't know Jim was the first and only Black Corporation Counsel for this city on the Harold Washington. Jim was there with the Panthers. Jim been around a long time, just like, you know, Lou was following him. I have Burby here. Burby's following Lou, and you have people who really care. Jim, I have Attorney Burby Powell on the phone. She's in the studio with me, and we really been talking about Lou Myers this morning, about what it means to take that torch and to carry that torch and work on behalf of your community. Sometimes when some people die, only their family misses them, but there are other folks, when they leave us, they make their transition. There's a hole in the black community. Certainly there's a hole right now. So we're going to be discussing Attorney Lou Myers for the rest of our hour today. We at 7 Talk of Chicago, 69 WVON. Our number is 773-591-6090. We're streaming live on www.wvon.com. We're on iHeartRadio. Take us wherever you go. We know you listen to us at the beauty shop. Listen to us all over the place. Take us, and if you miss it, you can go to Blog Talk. Listen back on Blog Talk. We're on blackplanet.com, Facebook group, Facebook, and Twitter. So we're back. Attorney Burby, I have Attorney Jim Montgomery online. I'm going to go to Attorney Jim Montgomery for a moment. You want to say good morning to Attorney Jim Montgomery?
Good morning, Attorney Montgomery. How are you?
Good morning. How are you? Doing very well. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Jim, we've been talking about Attorney Lou Myers this morning. We've been talking about the role of what we have what role do we have in the black community? And certainly Lou gave a lot to our community. He, like you, he followed in your footsteps, but he gave so much, and I know he was my attorney for all of those struggles and all those fights. When I took Harold Washington picture down, who was there for Lou? We fought Jane Byrne, and in jail with Marion Stamps, who was there for Lou? We fought the war. Well, Lou was always there when there was a struggle for black folks, and sometimes black people don't have money. And Lou said he'd just go in there and he would work so hard on behalf of our people, just as if he was getting paid. So we just commemorate Lou. We want to talk about it for a moment. I'm going to turn it over to you and let this be your classroom. The whole world is the stage for you to talk on right now, so I'm turning it over to you, Attorney Jim Montgomery.
Well, certainly you can look back at Lou's career that I've known for more than 40 years and say that he is probably one of the most dedicated lawyers for the cause of black people in this country. And of course he did so at great sacrifice to himself, as many of us have done. But the important thing about Lou was he was absolutely uncompromising in his fight for the black community.
Yes, he was. He really was. I was letting you want to say something else. Attorney Powell, you want to say something?
Well, that's one of the things that we were at his home yesterday, and we were looking at an old bio of his. And when you look at the history of Attorney Myers, all the way back to grade school, you know, and that's the problem with our children, or how people perceive our children today. And they look at them as rebellious, they look at them as needing medication. But if Lou was alive and was a child in this day, they would have put him on medication.
Of course.
He was kicked out of grade school. He was kicked out of high school. He was kicked out of college. He was kicked out of law school. But it wasn't because he was dumb. It wasn't because he was a problem child. It was because he was not satisfied with the prevailing conditions of the day. And our children, they may not be saying it with words, but they're saying it with actions. They're not satisfied with the prevailing conditions that they're subjected to in this quote-unquote educational system. And so when you realize that Attorney Myers just did not ever, from a child to his last days, ever become content with the state of affairs, then that becomes a lesson plan for all of us in this hour to never become content if we are not in a peaceful state. Right,
but and Lou happened to grow up in a time when there was really a strong black community that we got to get back to. But Jim, you know, Attorney Powell, Burby was there with Lou. He was taking him to rehab. He was with him every step of the way up until his death. So we want to thank Burby for the time that he took out to go to rehab, to be there with Lou after Lou had his surgery. He was there with him, and Burby, we really appreciate you for that. I want to play some of Lou's words for a few moments. You have it ready. We pulled up some so people can hear his words. We got some people on the phone. I'm going to take a couple of calls and come back to you and Jim. Jim, we just want to talk not only about Lou, Attorney Montgomery. We want to also just talk about our roles when we, as black people, when we're in position. You know, how do you pull that and hug that and do like Lou Myers did, and like you've done? I mean, that's why I said this is your classroom to teach, so those young people who are listening today will hear you about what they need to do. But first I'm going to go into Lou. Lou was talking about gangs at Chicago State.
Because students have family members who are in gangs, they've lost loved ones to gang violence. The class tends to become very emotional. Because when you're dealing with gang violence in Chicago, you're dealing with everyday life. And everybody in their classroom, let me give you this example. 95% of all of my students over the past 3 years that have come through my gang violence class, they either have gang members in their family, right? Or they're in gangs themselves, or they're in love with gang members. It's a baby's mama, somebody's baby's mama. But they all are, many of my students, well, not many, but I have ex-offenders, and all that life, you know, has encircled them. And it makes them, feel that they have a forum to vent and a forum to receive some understanding about what they're going through. So I'm always fascinated by that because it's the interaction among human beings around an issue that I'm most familiar with.
I mean, that was Lou Myers. I'm to hear his voice, Jim. That was typical Lou Myers, was it not, Jim?
Absolutely. I think another thing you need to look at with Lou was a great contributor to criminal justice. He would fight those criminal cases where they're trying to give bad black folks, an unjust trial or that kind of thing. I think many years ago, he and I were involved in a case in which there was an effort to try and indict certain members of the Muslim community for serious crimes down in Texas, and Lou grabbed me and we went down there and thwarted that deal, because apparently whenever there is an effort to go after a major black activist in this community or even a black politician, Lou has always been there, and I take my hat off to him, and I really see that he'll be missed.
He will be missed. There's a hole in the community.
Absolutely.
Burby, it's all right, baby. It's all right. You want to say something, Burby? Okay. Burby's torn up here for a minute, y'all. He's not going to be able to talk for a few seconds. We're going to give him some time. I want to just take a few calls, Jim. Let me just take a few calls. You need some. Bring Burby's. Oh, you can't drink water. Okay, that's right, Ramadan. It's going to be all right. We're going to get a little turn of Burby a second here. He's a little. You got to get himself together here for a moment. Eddie Reed.
Good morning, sister. How are you?
All right.
Good. Let me be very quick. I want
everybody who come on, would you be real quick, because my board is lit up and we want to talk to our guests as much as possible. Go on.
On late, but I don't know if anyone made this point. Of course, Brother Lou Myers was Lou Palmer's lawyer, and Lou Myers took on a case that some would not have taken. John Singstad blocked Lou Palmer from the defender.
Yeah, you talked about that yesterday. I remember that because Lou Palmer had changed himself to the defender. You talked about that yesterday on the air, and I did talk about the role Lou played with Seabuck. But that's because...
The other thing very quickly is there are pictures, I'll try to get it released in the next few days. Lou Myers didn't just get in the courtroom. He was on the battlefield. I have pictures of Lou Myers, myself, Sister Mary L., and Jeff Haas from the People's Law Clinic. We were protesting outside the police station when John Burge was still in the police station.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other thing about the John Burge. We started fighting John Burge back with Marion Stamps. But then I got to go because I can't let everybody just... Because the board is lit up and I want to get as much as Jim and Burby, Attorney Montgomery and Attorney Powers in as possible. But I thank you for calling, okay? Y'all help me out here today because I'm going to try to get to you. The board is lit up, but I want to talk to my guests too. Mansong.
Hotep to all of y'all, and condolences to our brother's family and everyone concerned. I met our brother down in Jacksonville, Florida back in 1992. A black economic group had invited him to be the keynote speaker. And he knew of me and I knew of him, but we had never met. And I also want to say that this brother read a manifesto. He had testicular fortitude. He read a manifesto in front of the FBI building when he had that big demonstration. Y'all remember that?
Yeah, Lou. I'm telling you, Lou was something. He was something, man. So everybody giving us something different. We got that now. We thank you, man. So I thank you so much. You know, everybody. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to, y'all, I'm going to take two more and then I'm going back to the phone. West from Atlanta, Georgia.
Hey, Ms. Darcy, the fight continues, okay?
Okay.
Congress just passed, the House of Representatives, the HB House Bill 5698. We got sold out by the Black Congressional Caucus.
Okay. Talk to me next week, Wes. Can't talk to you right now. We're talking about Attorney Lou Myers. Robert?
Thanks for taking my call, sister. Yeah, I'd like to express my condolences to Lou's family and to the community, which leaves a hole, as you stated, in the community, and Lou is gone. And I hope that story resonates that you said earlier about Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you. He's talking, Jim, about when I met with all them folks from my Burby got me a little upset over here. Not upset, but I'm feeling a little emotional. Let me go to you, Burby. Go on. Can you talk now?
Yes, thanks.
You feel all right?
I'm doing okay.
Okay.
So one thing, Andre Grant, he's more spiritual than I think he realized. He called me in January of this year, or maybe late December, and he said, Burby, I want to do something for Lou before it's too late. And I said, Dre, I'm in. I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get his autobiography finished. And I went to Lou's home, sat with him for a couple of hours, and he dictated into the recorder some of his history, and I went back and started working on it, and some different things happened that took my attention away. And so my point is, we had started on his autobiography, and so many people, you cannot imagine his representation of the Black Power movement and how far it spread from the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan to Reverend Jackson to Al Sharpton to
Dorothy Tillman and Marion Stamps and Lou Palmer. Y'all forget about Marion Stamps, my goodness.
Newton to Geronimo Pratt. Sada Shakur writes about him in her book. And so his story, quite honestly, more so than anyone else that I've ever seen as an attorney, crosses so many communities, groups, and individuals that we're going to commit ourselves to finish his biography and get it out so his story can always be read at some point.
You know, when I hear you talk about Lou, I hear Jim Montgomery also. There's so much like people don't really know all that Jim have given and have been doing over the years. Now,
and we're grateful to Attorney Montgomery for putting his book out. His ability to finish it so that the next generation of attorneys can read about those who were on the battlefield so much earlier than before we were even born, and that we need that. And thank you, Attorney Montgomery, for doing that so that the link in this chain of struggle can continue.
Jim?
Yeah, you know, I think that the idea of getting Lou's history put down in writing by somebody would be wonderful. Verba, you ought to be the person to be the catalyst for doing that, because here's a guy who has had a career that was incredible in terms of all of the lives that he touched in an effort to try and make lives better for Black people. What is the likelihood of being able to get that done?
Well, we've started it, Attorney Montgomery, and we've now recommitted ourselves to get it finished hopefully sometime this year.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
You started it before Lou passed.
We started before he passed.
Let me ask you this, Burby. Now, what happened with Lou? Because people want to know that. Because since you was there with him at all time, I think the Black community and the community at large want to know what happened to Lou Myers. So you need to tell us.
So Attorney Myers and I met at his home, and it didn't just start after the rehab. It started before the surgery, where he and I sat for a couple of hours at his home, just the two of us. We talked at least 3 hours. And what he said to me, and I can't tell the community this and the world this and that, he said to me, Burby, I knew this day was coming. Because many may not know that he had open heart surgery
26 years ago.
And at the time he had a valve replaced in his heart, and they told him this valve is going to last you 20 years. So he knew that if he continued to live, that he was going to have to get on that table again. And of course it went beyond that time. So what happened is he had a regular checkup and nothing to do per se with his heart, and he got home, and by the time he got home they said come back to the hospital. So he literally had to turn around and go back, and they were going to do surgery that day. And then they determined that it wasn't necessary, per se, to do it that day. And it got scheduled on a particular day, and then it got continued again because the doctors wanted to have more information about what they were going to perform.
Well, let me ask you this. Before we went back and redid it, he was doing all right. He went past the 20 years. He went to 26.
He did. However, they said that any day it could have gone south that day if he did not have the surgery. So it wasn't that the part was the condition.
I remember